Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, How to Spot Disruption and What You Can Do About It by Carlson Executive Education. We are pleased that you've chosen to spend your time learning steps you can take to navigate disruption in your industry. We'll start out today with introducing you to our speaker, Nair. Hari will share insights on what disruption is, how it has and will continue to shape industries, and how you can leapfrog your competition by being ready for disruption when it arrives. Please use the chat function on the webinar to submit your questions. To do this, click on the black bar at the bottom of the window to pull up the menu bar. Before we get started on the program, I would like to share a brief overview of Carlson Executive Education for those who may be new to us. Carlson Executive Education is a part of the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. For over 50 years, top business leaders at organizations ranging from small independent firms to Fortune 500 companies have partnered with Carlson Executive Education for cutting-edge insights and essential leadership development. And those insights come from our fantastic network of educators, one of whom we have the pleasure to hear from today. Mr. Nair has over 25 years of operational experience applying innovation approaches across multiple sectors and markets. Hari was a partner at InnoSight, a firm founded by Professor Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School, who is widely regarded as the leading authority for disruptive innovation. Hari teaches on the topic of disruptive innovation for executive education programs across the world. Hari is currently on an advanced leadership fellow at Harvard. And now we'll hear from Nair on how to spot disruption and what you can do about it.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar today. I'm really excited to join you to talk a little bit about disruption and what it really means and how you can protect your company or your organization from the forces of disruption in the future. One thing you have to begin with in disruption is really understand that disruption is not just a linear extrapolation of what's happened in the past. What's happening in disruption today is quite dramatic. It's happening across all industries, all sectors, and frankly, all functions. So if you're a manager and executive in any company, small, medium, large, you really need to understand what it means and what are those forces underlying disruption in your company, as well as what you can do about it. As we think about the future, there's really sort of three components that are going to define the future, three forces that are at play. First is an area that Professor Christensen calls jobs to be done, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. These arise in everyday lives, and these jobs really don't go away, and constantly there's innovation that's happening to address these jobs. Then, of course, there are disruptive solutions, and we can talk about what those are, but they can be quite kind of game-changing. It can be some things that aren't currently in your industry today, but they come in and they disrupt it. Sort of like what Netflix did to Blockbuster is always one of the classic examples of a disruptive solution. And then the third part is they often link to new business models because the way disruption typically comes into the market, the way you monetize it is different than how you currently monetize your business today. So understanding all these forces is really critical if you want to A, spot disruption, and B, do something about it. So one of the challenges that you will find that companies fail because they overinvest in what they're really good at today and underinvest in what they should be good at tomorrow. Again, if you're a small company, a medium-sized company, a large company, the large focus that we have is on the businesses of today, the next quarter's revenue or profit or this year's targets that we've set, versus really looking at saying, what should we really be good at tomorrow? And that's obviously linked to the strategy and the strategy growth. So if you're in a sector like, say, financial services or in say, the food and consumer food sector, both of these areas are facing lots of disruptive forces today, and you need to sort of think about how you're going to be a few years from now and what you want to be really good at a few years from now. And that will require you to sort of react to some of these disruptive forces. So as you look at it, I put this chart here to really illustrate the problem. So all of you joining the call today, most likely you're working for companies. And I'm putting you in the box of this middle thing that you see, which is the industry incumbents. This is kind of the players of today, all right? And what's happening is in every business that you're in today, virtually every business that you guys are in today, there are entrepreneurs, disruptive entrepreneurs that are out there in the world sort of trying to take your business in a way. Now, these entrepreneurs aren't just in North America. They could be anywhere in the world because the internet and the whole ability to connect has sort of democratized entrepreneurs everywhere in the world, right? At the same time, you have what I call the digital giants, which are companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, others out there, all trying to also attack the space too. So if you're in the insurance sector, healthcare sector, financial service sector, automotive sector, you can name it, you can see that there are forces that play at the entrepreneurial side and from these digital giants. And they're sort of squeezing virtually every company kind of in the middle. So what's happening is that more than ever, you need to get on with the journey of disruption and figure out, are you going to disrupt yourself before you get disrupted by either entrepreneurs or some of the digital giants? So that's really the intention of this 2-day program, is to really give you some tools to spot disruption, but also do something about it within the context of your company. So the idea is, as you think about, and I use the word future-proofing a lot, you have to make sure that you manage these two competing requirements. How you defend your core business, which is what you're good at today, and in the short term, that's where you need to be focused on too. In parallel, how do you design the new? And it's balancing these two tensions within any company that is the key to overcoming this. And many companies have successfully done this. They've been able to defend their core while they're creating the new. And that framework takes, to put into practice takes often a few years, but companies have done this successfully and been able to come out the other end. I mentioned Netflix earlier. If you remember back in the days when they used to first send DVDs by mail, they had, that was their business model. They used, they disrupted Blockbuster really from the idea of, hey, instead of going to a store, I'm going to send you DVDs by mail once you click online and order it. But then they saw the threat of streaming coming with the ability to stream directly, and DVDs sort of were still there. So they had to actually create that streaming business at the same time as they were selling their DVDs. And that caused a lot of disruption for, if you can imagine, if you were used to getting DVDs in the mail, and all of a sudden Netflix is asking you to say it's going to go away and we're going to start giving you, Netflix via streaming. People started to object, and there was a period of time where it was actually harsh for the current consumers, the core consumers that were collecting, getting their DVDs. But what they saw and what they spotted was the future, and they created an entirely new business around streaming, which grew their business significantly. Oh, by the way, those people who were unhappy that their DVDs were going away eventually shifted over to streaming as well. So this is what I mean by future-proofing. It's ability to spot these things in your respective sectors and functions, and then figuring out a new business and then changing it in parallel. I talked earlier about jobs to be done, and I think this is an important framework that you'll see in the workshop. So the way you spot disruption, the way as a practitioner, I've seen disruption and now I spot disruption, is through looking at businesses that target specific jobs to be done. But here's a collection of companies that really didn't exist 15 years ago. So this is a series of companies that I'm sure almost all of you who are listening to this call would have used at least one of these products in the last year. That's a pretty fair assumption. And if you think about it, each of these, whether it's Uber or Twitter or Netflix, I mentioned earlier, or Fitbit, they're designed in a way to target specific jobs to be done that we have in our lives. And you'll learn more about that in the workshop that we're going to run in June. But the idea is that, consumers really don't really buy any product. they actually hire it for specific jobs that arise in their lives. And if you solve jobs in their lives, they'll keep hiring your product over and over again. And what this framework allows you to do is start looking at all the different ways that a specific job can be satisfied versus just looking at the product that you're currently selling today. So when you look at jobs to be done, it's actually a beautiful framework to sort of spot disruptions. Disruptions typically come when a job is satisfied better than the current alternatives, and then people just migrate to that new business because it's just a lot easier way to get things done. So this is a framework that we'll go into in rather great detail when we have the session in June. The other piece is, and some of you may be familiar with this, and this is not new, there's something called the design thinking framework, which you probably have seen from years ago. This in particular was developed by a company called IDEO. Design thinking looks at three dimensions. It looks at desirability, feasibility, and viability. It's the desirability piece that's really targeting the job to be done. So for those of you who are familiar with this framework, I'll show you how this links to the jobs to be done, because when you think about desirability, the way I frame it is that, are we helping people solve the job to be done? That's what makes it desirable. Then, of course, there's feasibility, which is, do you have the technical ability to make the solution work that solves that job? And then finally, it's the viability, which is, of course, the business model and the financial justification of the idea. So this framework's been around for years, but we try to use this framework as we put together the disruptive innovation model and teach that. And of course, I added the word agility because one other element that you'll see is that, in today's world, you just don't have time to kind of spend months doing each of these three circles. You have to sort of do this in an iterative way. So agility is about finding things that are desirable, jobs that need to be satisfied, developing quick prototypes which are feasible, and then testing the viability in a more entrepreneurial way. So you sort of bring that whole thing together, and that's how you get the disruptive innovation framework. So overall, in this workshop, training session that we're going to run on June 4th and 5th, we're going to actually spend 2 days. The first day, we'll really focus on the forces at play. I'll really go into a detail across different sectors around the introduction, disruption, and what you really have to see in terms of patterns that are emerging across sectors. We'll spend a considerable amount of time on customer centricity and this whole jobs to be done framework. In my 26 years in the professional sector, I feel that jobs to be done is the one big aha moment that I had in terms of really defining how to develop and spot opportunities, right? So we often do a lot of market research to try to find new ideas, but I think this jobs to be done framework is really the best tool that's available to really identify disruptive opportunities. We'll also, since it's sort of going to be a teaching session and then doing session, so you should come to the course with some ideas in mind about what may be some disruptive opportunities in your respective business, and then we'll actually try to provide some structure. I'll facilitate it for each of you to sort of come up with disruptive solutions, right, in that particular business that you're in today. So we'll actually give you some frameworks on how to develop disruptive solutions. And then we go to day 2, where we're going to actually start applying the disruptive solution frameworks to create new business models. Like I said, typically disruptive opportunities will, by definition, come out into the marketplace with new business models. Good example is the Dollar Shave Club, which came out a few years ago, which is basically selling a razor, right? It's no different than what Gillette would be selling or Schick would be selling as razors, but it was packaged together with a specific job to be done, which is, I don't want to really have to go buy razor and razor blades at the pharmacy or at the local store, with a solution which frankly was pretty similar to other razors, but it was the business model that made it really unique, which was the fact that they would do it by subscription and then they would offer other packages around it, right? And pretty rapidly, that subscription-based business model grew to a rather sizable business in the razor and blades marketplace. So developing business models will be a key part of this exercise. And then the last part goes into that whole element about agility, right? So there's the whole idea of test and learn. So how do you iterate these things in the market? And then finally, we talk about culture a little bit around the fact that if you're going to try to do disruption in your company or in your function, you also need to think deeply around how to change the mindsets around handling that defend the core view as well as developing the new. That requires a different sort of a culture and a different sort of a mindset to do both at the same time. So that's what the program's all about. I'm really excited to offer this in partnership with the Carlson School of Management. I'm originally from the Midwest, although I now live in Boston, and I look forward to seeing you guys in person in early June and working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hari. We do have one question, and that is, how can you manage resistance to change in your team as you're developing new solutions and trying to work innovation into your business strategy?
That's a great question. And I think this goes at that last point I talked about culture and mindset. You know, I think, first of all, you have to go in with the assumption there will be resistance to change. So I think knowing that that is something you could prepare for up front, I feel is typically the first step. Very often people, you know, I've seen disruptive teams in companies that don't take the time to kind of recognize that there will be resistance. So I think spending some time up front to think about that is really key. But you know, how I typically manage it, I think goes back to getting everyone aligned on the customer centricity point, right? So typically what I've seen, involving your team in that process of that jobs to be done discovery, common framework, a common set of understanding of why you're going down this path, right? So that I would say is the best way to do that, is enrolling that. The other thing is get some quick wins, right? Don't necessarily shoot for the moon right away. Let's start with some really quick wins that allow you to start seeing how this methodology works. And it could be small, it can be an internal program. It doesn't even have to hit the customer. You know, it could be something within human resources. It could be something related to how you manage your talent, how you do you know, Kaizen, or some of the you know, efforts around cost savings. Any of these programs that are already in companies, if you can apply this framework and act, you know, go for some quick wins, I've seen that show some really good dividends.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you, Hari, for your insights. You can learn more about Carlson Executive Education's program, Disruptive Innovation, this June, and register at our website, z.umn.edu/disrupt. This webinar content will be shared on Carlson Executive Education's LinkedIn page, so you can find it there to share it with your network, and follow us for more great business insights. We hope to see you here in Minneapolis for the 2-day program, Disruptive Innovation.